The mysterious and intimidating leader of a radical anarchist group storms the central market and exchange of the city, calls all the people working there thieves, shuts down all commerce, but he manages to escape before the authorities can catch him. Sounds like just another Passover for Jesus, but I'm talking about the 2012 movie The Dark Knight Rises, in which Bane pretty much wrecks the justice system, the economy, and the entire government of Gotham. But despite all his populist rhetoric, this isn't an authentic revolution. It's just a cover for a scheme to steal Wayne Enterprises from Bruce Wayne by a member of his board.
Speak of the devil, and he shall appear.
No, wait, it turns out that it was just a cover for a scheme to destroy Bruce Wayne's soul since he doesn't fear death.
When it is done, and Gotham is ashes, then you have my permission to die.
No, wait, it turns out it's just a cover for Bane trying to please the woman he's in love with, who turns out to be Talia, who's Ra's al Ghul's daughter, who's upset because Batman killed her dad.
The powerful will be ripped out from their decadent layers and cast out into the gold that we know and endure.
In the movie, Bane sometimes sounds like an anti-capitalist leftist, but then he also sometimes sounds like a libertarian, and then he also ends up creating like a fascist military dictatorship complete with kangaroo court, so... yeah, that movie had trouble sticking to a theme. About 9 months before Christopher Nolan released the third movie in his Batman trilogy, a movement called Occupy Wall Street made headlines by occupying Zuccotti Park near the New York Stock Exchange, and then cities all over the country and even around the world. The camps were eventually disbanded, but the Occupy movement continues in other ways. For example, the Rolling Jubilee has successfully bought and then abolished $14.7 million worth of student debt and medical loans. And last week it was announced that another branch of the movement called the Debt Collective is beginning a debt strike. 15 former students of the Corinthian Colleges chain are refusing to pay back their loans and demanding the right to collective bargaining. It's a similar idea to collective bargaining for labor unions. These sorts of subversive actions, just like the original Occupy Wall Street camps, generate all sorts of debate about what sorts of tactics constitute legitimate forms of protest. But that little word, legitimate, is precisely the one that gives the game away. Because legitimacy is something that is granted by existing power structures, and thus a movement which seeks to change or abolish those power structures will never be seen as legitimate by those who benefit from the status quo. Neutering protest movements by making them obey certain rules to be seen as legitimate is a tactic for squelching resistance. And when that doesn't work, it is always the aim of the powerful to make protest movements seem illegitimate. Or the even worse coverage of the Ferguson movement, which focused so intensely on rioting. Bane is supposed to be a scary bad guy because he supposedly shows you that behind serious protest movements there is actually a nihilistic violent impulse, which pretends to be rooting for the little guy, but really just wants to watch the world burn. When Jesus bust into the temple court, which was kind of like the New York Stock Exchange and the Supreme Court of the province of Judea, and shut the whole thing down, the authorities were kind of freaking out. It was really this action that shifted Jesus from the defame column into the kill column in the minds of the temple authorities, which is made especially clear in the Synoptic Gospels. To them, Jesus must have appeared as a Bane-like villain, a guy willing to cross all lines of public decency and order under cover of populist sentiments, a guy who was interested in bringing it all crashing down. And let's not fail to notice that Jesus basically does promise to level the temple. Not a stone left atop another stone! That's in the Synoptics again. John really prefers to have Jesus talking in lofty metaphor. The heart of all these stories is the interaction between violence and legitimacy. Bane's actions, though superficially oriented toward rectifying injustice, are ultimately portrayed as illegitimate because they're ultra-violent, like murdering everyone in Gotham violence. But Batman isn't a true story, and I don't just mean because it's fiction. It's untrue because it portrays violence going in the wrong direction. Like Bane, Jesus disrupts his society, but not because he's violent. Cleansing the temple is a revelatory action which helps us see, to quote a famous peasant, the violence that's inherent in the system. All it took was Jesus knocking over a few tables for the authorities to escalate to crucifixion. In the same way that it only took a few people sitting at stools where they weren't allowed, or refusing to disperse a march peacefully for the police to escalate to fire hoses and dogs during the civil rights movement. Or the way that it only took some people occupying a park and singing songs and having some meetings for the NYPD to break out their batons and pepper spray. Or the way it only took some people holding their hands in the air or blocking traffic for body armor and tanks and high-powered rifles to become everyday sights on the streets of Ferguson. The everyday injustices of our society are held up by a tremendous amount of largely invisible violence, while the smallest acts of disobedience and rebellion by members of that society are portrayed as catastrophic breaches of the social contract. The task of anyone who loves justice is to find ways of making that pervasive, invisible violence visible. Sometimes that means making yourself a whip of cords and knocking over some tables. Hey, we're at video number 3 of these things. I don't normally wear my glasses in the videos because they're reflective, and also because I broke them this week, and so they're taped together, which is super nerdy. There. Thank you for watching. I hope you like them. If you do, click the likey thing or the subscribey thing, which is like one of those places. And also, I'm curious if any of you are committed to some form of nonviolence, or even if you're not, do you think that social change agents, or people who are working for justice in our society, should restrict themselves from engaging in, like, disruptive tactics like property destruction or civil disobedience or impeding traffic or things like that? Let me know in the comments. Take care. Hey, when I sit up here, can you actually tell that I'm wearing pants and not just boxers?
Perhaps he's wondering why someone would shoot a man before throwing him out of a plane. Victory has defeated you.
I sound like Yoda doing an impression of Bane.